Finnish, Estonian, Hungarian, Nenets, Lule Sami. These and many other languages all belong to the Uralic language family, with the ancestral language being Proto-Uralic. Proto-Uralic was a language hypothesized to be spoken by hunter-gatherer turned farmers by a population that lived in a snowy forest somewhere in this area, between about 4,000 and 6,000 years ago. The idea that some of the languages of Eastern Europe are related date all the way back to the 1600s, making this probably one of the world's oldest language hypotheses, and it was proposed by the German Martin Vogel and the Swedish Georg Stenholm. The two came up with the idea separately to each other, but putting the two different hypotheses together, the proposed language family included Estonian, Sami and Hungarian, although the Hungarian linguists of the time didn't really believe Hungarian was a Uralic language, preferring instead a connection to Turkish. After about 100 years, the Proto-Indo-European language was proposed, at which point the work on the Uralic language family pretty much froze completely, because everyone became more interested in this new language family that somebody had proposed. But from about the 1840s to 1900s includes pretty much all the basic work that the entire modern hypothesis of language family is based on, including pretty much all the primary research and the addition of the Samoyed languages into the family, which is basically what created the entire modern form of the language family in the first place, because before there were only really two branches. These days, Proto-Uralic is constructed with about 19 consonants and 4 to 8 vowels, depending on how you count them. They were Aba, Ada, Aja, Acha, Aga, Ama, Anna, Anya, Anga, Asa, Asha, Asha, Ava, Avia, Allah, Aha, Aya, Awa, Aya, and the 8 vowels are E, U, E, A, U, U, and R. And this last phoneme here is probably Aha, but no one is actually very certain because it just vanished from all descendants. There are also several phonemes which have one or two different versions reconstructed for them, because again there isn't enough evidence to work out exactly what it was. I simply read out the most likely version of any sounds that has multiple versions. There are in fact other problems with reconstructing the language, pretty much all down to evidence, but also because almost the entirety of the language family are minority languages spoken in the permafrost regions of Russia, so they're very hard to get at and there's not many speakers anymore. But people have obviously tried, and there are about 150 words reconstructed for Proto-Uralic. Beyond just these 150 words, the language also has a reconstructed complex system of conjugation and front-back vowel harmony. And it's because of this vowel harmony in the language that I said earlier, it's up to you to choose whether there are 4 or 8 vowels. Using what has been reconstructed of Proto-Uralic, I have tried making a couple of lines myself of the Proto-Uralic language. This is what it might have sounded like. Mun mi kalam utum timpane vihmi sursi palakipa. In trying to construct that sentence, I did have to go and make a few assumptions on the language family. For instance, I looked at the modern descendants to make a rough guess what the word order was probably, because nobody's actually entirely sure what the word order is. And I also had to look at modern descendants to try and work out what the trigger for the vowel harmony would be, because different languages, even within this one family, have different triggers for vowel harmony. And now away from the spoken language and onto the physical reality of its speakers, or at least the hypothesized physical reality of the language. There has been a very long debate over the homeland of the Uralic languages, ranging all the way from central Siberia deep into Central Europe. But these days, the location is usually given around the Kama River in Russia, quite near to the Ural Mountains, and the language is dated to roughly 5,500 to 4,000 years ago. With this information, it is possible to have a guess at who would probably have been the physical archaeological culture to have spoken the Proto-Uralic language. So, who were the most likely archaeological culture to have spoken Proto-Uralic? Well, say hello to the Pitcomb culture, which existed across this area, around the Urals, down to the Volga and the Kama rivers. They also existed about the right time, about 6,200 to 4,000 years ago. So they end about the right time and predate the hypothesized language a bit, which works quite well, I guess. The Pitcomb people were hunter-gatherers who lived near or around bodies of water, so the rivers and lakes and sometimes the coast. And they made, for their namesake, Pitcomb decorated pottery. The culture also predated both farming and the Bronze Age in far northern Europe. Now, to go further towards the modern day, it is widely agreed that the Proto-Uralic language broke up into its descendants about 4,000 years ago. The Samoyedic branch is accepted as one of these descendants, and that Proto-Samoyed, the language of all the Samoyedic languages, migrated into this area, or at least its speakers migrated into this area. Beyond that, there is pretty much no agreement about how the language family broke up. Traditionally, there are only two branches, the other branch being Proto-Phoeno-Ugric. But this view has come under more and more criticism in recent years because Proto-Phoeno-Ugric and Proto-Uralic are so incredibly similar to each other. So people are saying that Proto-Phoeno-Ugric might just be a very young dialect descendant or might not have even existed at all. The new version language family that is slowly gaining more support is a three-branch version of the family, with Samoyedic as one branch, Ugric as a second branch, and Phoeno-Permic as the third branch. But there's also a small popular version of the language family with four branches. Again, we have Samoyedic and Ugric, but this time Phoeno-Permic is broken up again into Permic and Phoeno-Volgaic. Volgaic?
Volgaic.
If we go back to the traditional view of the language family and our map, there is still not a huge amount of agreement over where the Phoeno-Ugric branch even migrated to. Like I said, beyond Samoyedic there is almost no agreement. The Phoeno-Ugric speakers could have migrated to any of these places, and they all have about as much popularity as each other in the modern linguistical community. Anyway, let's try and distance ourselves from this disagreement and see what comes up next. Our next point is, how did the languages change themselves? So how did Proto-Uralic change into its descendants? Well, let's be frank, not a lot actually changed. Let's have a look at the vowels and aha in particular, as they actually have the most obvious change. And we also have a word, nyachli, as our word. Proto-Samoyed first. Proto-Samoyed has quite a complex set of vowel changes, but first I'll deal with the consonant aha. This became a brand new vowel in the language. It became year, and that is Proto-Samoyed's contribution to why aha is so hard to reconstruct in Proto-Uralic, because it becomes a vowel. But now onto the vowels, that after all I've done the only consonant I'm looking at. Under certain situations, became rounding and unrounding occurred for loads of other vowels to create, eventually, or a new E because the old E had vanished, and a new A because the old A had vanished. Many vowels also then reduced to a certain version of which are and and then there are the consonants. Proto-Samoyed had quite a large set of transitions for its consonants as well, but it's a lot harder to track exactly what happened. So in general, a third of them disappeared altogether, and another third of them became dental, which resulted in almost half of Proto-Samoyed's consonants actually being dental, compared with only about just under a third in Proto-Uralic. And altogether, this leaves us with the word nyai. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. In Proto-Phonetic, again, aha vanished. This is why I say nobody's even sure if this sound existed, because it vanished pretty much immediately on all the descendants. But this time, aha did leave something behind. It caused any vowels before it to double in length in something that is known as compensatory lengthening. These long vowels then raised one position in the mouth, so air became ear, for instance. As for the vowel harmony, not a lot changed again, although E did become neutral, but it is hard to tell whether it was opaque or transparent neutrality. This leaves us with the word nyeli. Now, let's turn our clock back a few thousand years and look at the ancestors of Proto-Uralic instead. Firstly, there are no widely accepted ancestors to the Proto-Uralic language, but there are plenty of hypotheses that have been given. Only 2 of them have actually seen any serious credibility. First of all, there is the Indo-Uralic language family, which I have mentioned before, and it is a connection between Uralic and Indo-European languages. But the other credible idea is the far more complicated one. Let's say that first. Let's deal with the easy bit, its name. It is known as Proto-Uralic Yukaghir, and unsurprisingly, it connects Uralic to the Yukaghir languages. The language itself, as in Proto-Uralic Yukaghir and the family idea, is pretty much completely widely discredited, and Proto-Indo-Uralic is a far more accepted language family. But here's where the complex bit come in. The idea that Proto-Uralic and Proto-Yukaghir being related, as far as I can tell, seems to be widely accepted in an idea called the Para-Uralic language family. And this basically states that Uralic and Yukaghir are related, but you can't actually physically work out anything else about the family because there's not enough evidence left. You can't work out any words, you can't work out when they were joined together, you can't work out where they existed, you can't work anything out because you have not enough evidence to work on. So like I said, it's a bit complicated, but from what I can work out, Para-Uralic is widely accepted, and Proto-Indo-Uralic is a natural language family that is the most widely accepted direct connection for the Proto-Uralic language. Of course, like I said, a fully fledged language ancestor is not accepted by most people. Anyway, thanks for watching, and next time I will explore the physical remains and culture of the Proto-Uralic people, how their beliefs may have worked, and why the elders may have had a high rate of lung cancer.